as a younger writer and in my younger years, I actually think acting classes were a great way to work on that muscle as well. It's a kind of structured way to work just the imagination muscle. One of the topics that I was looking at here that we hadn't gotten to yet, that Nick had asked us to talk about, had to do with, and I'll try and balance it off of what you're talking about here. One of them was about developing your skills as a writer.
Oh, that's a very good question.
And the way he put it is, developing your skills as a writer. In almost every other pursuit, it's understood that targeted practice of individual skills leads to better performance in the long term. For example, a basketball player doesn't become skilled just by playing games. He practices shooting, ball handling, passing, athleticism, etc., individually, and then the games are just a reflection of his improving each of these skills. Any thoughts on taking a targeted approach to developing one's skills as a writer beyond just writing scripts and stories?
It's a really interesting question. So I think one can get better at writing by writing. And I think, particularly, again, I'll kind of ally this a little bit with what I've been exploring lately, which is long form prose writing too. I think that you can really hone your skills by going, hey, I'm just going to write a little short vignette scene thing today. I'm going to write it in first person. I don't normally write in first person. What's it like to write in first person? There's lots of different like techniques and things that I think long form prose writers have that I don't think screenwriters have. Could you go away and write a scene that you might not normally do? There was a great book I got years ago on playwriting, like 20 years ago. Really great. And it was filled with exercises about how to write a play. And one of the exercises was, write a scene where someone is keeping a secret. Write a scene where someone wants to say something but can't. Write a scene where, and there were all these different examples. I go away and write scenes and practice that.
Right.
It's just for me now where we're at. I don't know that's an amazing use of time. I don't know that I would go, I'm just going to go and learn how to write this kind of action or that kind of thing. I think we've said it before and I'll say it again. I think reading screenplays is very important continually. And I think watching movies and TV shows is very important.
Consuming content.
Yeah. But I think individually, I don't know.
It's not something. What's interesting about the question to me is that it's not something I've ever really put a lot of time into thinking about. I think that from a practice, like if you were going to look at it in terms of like being an athlete, or I'm trying to think of another career that's like that in that sense, but whereby you're trying to like get better and better and you're practicing even after you've become a professional, you continue to practice and continue to get better. There's a lot of professions where you keep educating yourself. And you need to be up to date on the latest technologies or the latest methods or the latest laws or whatever it might be. And I do think that there's a certain amount of re-education that you can always be doing in entertainment and screenwriting as well. That's partly by reading screenplays of the most recent movies that have been coming out, partly just by keeping in touch with what's going on in the industry. I know that doesn't have to do with the creative side, but I think it's important to just to have your pulse on what people are buying, on what people are watching, what movies are winning the weeks, what movies are at the top of the streaming charts, kind of just understanding the marketplace. But then also, like, outside of just writing scripts and stories, I've never thought about, like, how do you develop that additional muscle, because I do think creativity is a muscle as well.
Mm.
Imagination is a muscle. I think practicing, sounds weird, but practicing imagination is definitely a way to
totally
your skills.
Well, I kind of feel that it's something that we do when we have a few hours free. We go, let's just come up with some new ideas.
Yeah, well,
a week we came up with 3 movie ideas,
and I think
too,
I think too that, you know, while I've thought about going back to acting class because I would just love to, I don't know that I actually have time in my life currently, but as a younger writer and in my younger years, I actually think acting classes were a great way to work on that muscle as well. It's a kind of structured way to work just the imagination muscle, as well as the kind of human behavior, getting inside of characters, getting inside of voices,
understanding character desire and intention and action. It makes you look at great plays and great pieces of writing that obviously plays are so dialogue heavy. You really, I think, begin to understand the rhythm of written dialogue. That said, one of the things that some people do is they carry a notebook around with them whenever they hear bits of dialogue. Oh, that's an amazing way. You talk in a really interesting way. You can observe people.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
Eavesdropping.
Totally. Become a spy.
It's not a bad thing, actually.
Totally. Absolutely.
Especially like just watching human behavior.
Yeah.
Noticing the things around you. It sounds weird, but it's like spending time with, like, we've called it filling the well.
Yes.
Just being in the world. If you're writing about, obviously there's research things that you can do. If your story involves certain things, you want to do that.
That's more project specific.
That's project specific. But what's interesting too, although I don't have a technique to share, but I do think like getting good at research would be very helpful. If you were writing things that require a lot of like background knowledge. We tend to write in fantasy and science fiction, so there's less.
It's more world building.
More like we're building out our own places. We don't really need to know the rules of the real world as much. But I remember like
our rules.
Yeah, but I do think that like there's a skill in being able to absorb other cultures, other time periods, other places.
Yeah.
Whether it's reading about those things and absorbing that, and then seeing like how could I translate that into a scene? How could I translate that into dialogue?
Yeah.
I don't, it's an interesting question. I don't think, because neither of us ever went to school for screenwriting. These are the kinds of things that you might learn in an academic setting.
Absolutely. It might be go and write a scene whereby blank.
Work on your dialogue.
Totally. All of the character reveals in this scene should be done using showing and not telling.
Right.
That might be an interesting exercise. To go, how am I learning about character through something that they do on screen rather than through what's said?
But truthfully speaking, we don't do any of that.
We don't do any of that. No.
We do it through writing scripts, and we will go back and go, hey, how can we make the dialogue better in the scene, and workshop the dialogue in a scene?
Yeah.
Or we will go back and say, hey, we're doing a lot of telling. How can we show more of this? And we might, work through a scene to try and figure out ways in which we want to show better.
Yeah.
And then I think the growth just comes from the practice.
Yeah.
I think the difference, and I think what Nick is asking about in terms of, the practice then leading to the team sport.
Yeah.
The reality is every script you write is that practice.
Yeah, I hear that.
Like you're building your muscle with every single scene that you write. And so you may never get to the team sport. You may end up, and that would be equivalent to maybe selling the script, but it's all the work that you put into all of these things.
Yeah, totally.
Go into honing your skills. And really, I think it's fill the well, watch movies, watch TV, read screenplays, read books, and write. It's just totally simple, but that's really what it is, at least from our perspective. If there's a trick out there to get better at writing certain ways, I'd love to know it. So if any watchers or listeners have had fun techniques that they've used over the years to hone skills, share them.
Let us know.
Share them, please.
That's good.
Please, yeah. Great.
Thanks, Nick.
So